is the patrol supervisor today. He's at the end of his shift, and it's his Friday. He's had a pretty wild week, which I'm sure he'd be loved to tell you about. Kyle's been with us since 2013. He took a little detour to California, but he came back, so we don't count that. Corporal Jeff Ordona next is the detective supervisor. Corey's at training right now. Jeff's been with us for 11 years. And then next to Jeff is Sergeant Sean Ryan. He's our training manager and operations sergeant. He's also took a couple of detours, but 2007 and then the academy and then back here 2017. And then behind there's Susan Craig, who's actually been with the police department since the mid-90s, also took a detour to be our daughter's school teacher at 5 Acre and a few other things, but she's the supervisor in PenCom and also on the admin side. You know, she's the admin supervisor that gets a lot of stuff done for us. And of course, you guys all know Chief Vieta, who's standing to my left. So, and my wife, Kristen Faye Smith, is also here keeping an eye on me, which I really appreciate. So. So House Bill 2015 is called the Law Enforcement Funding Bill. And what we're going to do tonight is talk about a little bit like how it got created. It's, I think, an interesting story about politics and really success, what it is and how it works and why is it so important to us. Finance Director Carazos is going to help a little bit with the how it works part because it's got a lot of financial pieces to it. So in 2011, it became known that Washington was 51st in the U.S. for police staffing. And I started hearing that. I think GFA, we started, oh, great, we're 51st. I thought there's only 50 states. Well, D.C. gets counted, so we're 51st. So Oregon is 50th, or it has been. And the gap between us and Oregon is always like huge amounts of money, like $150 million. So we've been 15 years, 51st. And that dynamic has been played out in like staffing, coverage, narratives about policing, crime rates, all of that. And then the other thing that kind of played into being 51st is really Washington police reform. So in the 2021 session and up until, I don't know if I count this last session, but every session, but really 2021, substantial changes were made to us in terms of mandates, training, restrictions, things that we have to do, things that we have to address, things that take us out of the field. The 80 hours a year that we have is subtracted. And some of those things you could argue, actually a lot of them have made us better, team up, slow down, things that actually we do better, but they take us out of the field. So really we're like 52nd or 53rd, if you think about it that way. Like those things have subtracted from our ability to be out in the field, and the public notices it, we notice it, we see it in our overtime, we see it in our staffing. Something that was surprising to me, having lived this for a couple of years, really 2023, 4, and 5, I testified in favor of one of the early bills, which is just holding back 0.1% of 1% sales tax, about $500,000. That was the original proposal. Mayor Dexter also testified in favor of that proposal, but there was no chance, as far as we could see with WASPIC or AWC, that was ever going to get out of committee. Those things were stuck. There was no way that was going to make it. Governor Ferguson last year was running for office. He picks up the issue of 51st in the U.S. and me, being in the middle of this, I didn't expect him as a campaign issue to pick it up because I don't know that it would have affected his ability to get elected. That's my opinion. So he started saying in his campaign ads, Washington's 51st. That's a problem. And if I'm elected, I'm going to fix it. And this bill, House Bill 2015, that he signed last May, became his sort of signature thing towards public safety. And I've heard him say, it's not exactly how I do it, but it's what I wanted. So all of that is really the reason we're here talking about it. And I looked up who voted. Actually, Nathan asked me, and I thought everybody here voted for it. And then I looked up, and sure enough, Senator Mike Chapman voted against it, but I talked to him, and he voted against it for reasons of what he originally co-sponsored. This thing had morphed into something that he didn't like, but he did vote against it. Adam Birnbaum and Steve Theringer voted for it, and 55 people in the House voted for it, and 42 voted against it. In the Senate, it was 30-19, and if you look at it's pretty bipartisan. I mean, I don't think it skews any one direction. So we get a bill signed, and you're going to hear a little bit more from Chief Vieta about what it's taken us to get where we are right now. But passed last year, it's been described as the police funding bill. Its period of performance started July 1st last year. It's a 3-year, part of it, the grant part's a 3-year package. What this means to us is, the FBI benchmark for staffing is really 2 per 1,000, which would put us at 40. And with our non-code enforcement people, our regular detectives, patrol, and specialty people, we have 33. We have the same number as when I arrived here 18 years ago. The grant that we're going to talk about would get us up to 37. So that's about a 18% bump. But all those extra people will go onto the patrol shifts. So this is a super big deal for us. There's no way to say it except for that. And in the back of the room is the balance of the Blue Patrol team. Officer Whitney Fairbanks, Officer Lily Emery, and Officer Micaiah Brady are the mixture of night shift and day shift here on the Blue team. And I asked them, if you're not doing anything or on a call or whatever, please come so I can, embarrass you and introduce you to everybody. But Whitney's been with us 11 years. We hired her the week after she graduated from college. She's our K-9 coordinator. Lily's been with us 2022 and Micaiah 2023. That's my math. Sorry if I got that wrong. But I mean, they recent graduation for them, recent officers, but we're super proud of all of them. So House Bill 2015 has 2 parts to it. It's a grant program. And originally it wasn't supposed to be, but it became a grant program. And so it's a grant program to give cities or counties, it's called the law enforcement grant program, but it's got other things that you could get money for. 75% of salary and benefits up to $125,000. And second part, a council or commission approved 1/10 of 1% sales tax for public safety option. So, but wait, you don't just get that. You don't just do an application. Qualified cities or counties had to establish policy and procedure and qualifications in key law enforcement areas: immigration, use of force, K-9, protection orders, and there might be one more. They're up on our website. So we had to make substantial additions, proofs, essentially a whole nother accreditation program. We started on that in August of last year, and we were notified in April that we were awarded the grant. So Chief Vieta was the one who ran that process, and I think it'd be helpful for you to hear a little bit from him about what we did and how we got there.
Okay, thank you. Like Chief Smith said, one of the requirements for this grant is to update certain policies. There's 5 policies that are strictly required, and we adopted all of the required updates. The first policy is immigration. There's also use of force. There's also our K-9 policy. There's also our protective order policy, and then our volunteer policy. I probably don't have to explain why some of these policies are of absolute importance to the people in Olympia that are administering this grant. You might say, well, what about volunteers? And just what's important to the people that are administering this grant is that we don't use volunteers inappropriately, or we don't use them to do more than they're qualified to do, or things of that nature, that we don't use the use of volunteers to get around other regulations. That's why that's in there. That was the policy that I really spent the least time on, but I just wanted to make that clear. I've already listed the other ones. All of them are on our website, and most of them, it's pretty clear which portions of the policy are specific to this grant. And so just to be clear that in accepting this grant or in agreeing to this grant, we're agreeing to yet another level of oversight in addition to all the other oversight that exists. But the people who administer the grant will have a compliance process and will come to me and say, prove to me that you're complying with all of these things that you said you would comply with when you applied for this grant. And so if there are people that are concerned about those topics that I listed, and I'm sure that there are, just know that saying yes to this grant is saying yes to an additional layer of oversight. And so, yes, it took quite a bit of time to update our policies, but yes, we did that. And yes, Criminal Justice Training Commission looked at what we had done and in comparison to their answer key and said, okay, you've done what we asked you to do. And as far as we're concerned, you're approved to proceed with the grant. There's some training that's required, and I want to just reemphasize what Chief Smith said, in that training is important. We want more training for officers, and a lot of people say that they do. It's important to remember that somebody has to instruct that, somebody has to plan it, somebody has to go away to training and learn the curriculum and then bring it back here and deliver it. And officers don't train for free. And so people work 2,080 hours a year, and every hour that is spent in training is an hour that they're not on the street. And so training is great. It's important. We need to do it, but it's also just a reality that we have to accept, that when an officer gets 40 more hours of training a year, that's a week that officer is not out on the street doing what our stakeholders really want them to do. So more from me later. Those are just a few of the bullet points.
So the grant funding part of House Bill 2015, 75% of entry-level officers' salary and benefits up to $125,000 per position, up to 36 months. So if we'd known about all the stuff they wanted us to do, we would have done it a year and a half ago and been ready on July 1st and turned in our homework. But that's not how it works. So period of performance, we're coming up on a whole year that we waited, and the process of being approved was pretty substantial. It wasn't just review it and send it in. It was a lot of back and forth. I gave you guys a sample of the application we turned in, had a lot of links attached to it. I have no idea how many pages that would be if you had all the policy, but it would be a lot of them. But the grant does allow funding for training required by the commission if you don't exceed 125,000. And then they added, and this is politics, and you can follow this, broader law enforcement and public safety efforts such as emergency management planning, community outreach, mental health crisis was all added to things you could apply for. So we didn't apply for those things. We applied for officer positions. We're pretty well aware of the support we have from social workers. Rediscovery has 7 people assigned to us. We have 2 lead teams with PBH and with Reflections, which we work really well with. We have a whole PBH DCR folks that do crisis response. We have 4 community paramedics. We have a pretty good package of all those things. We don't have enough of us in our view, and it would be very unlikely that the 80 to 100 hours that Chief Vieta did, and we've got other staff time, we would have applied that to rework our entire policies and then, apply for social workers. And I don't even know if that would have been funded, because you had to kind of follow the matrix of what it looked like was going to get funded. And so we applied for 4 officer positions and we got awarded that. So the amount is $785,000. It's only 2 years. Is it possible this grant's going to get extended? That was talked about early on. We don't know that. It's $100 million total, but the period of performance for this legislation ends June 30th, 2028. And then because we qualified, the city is also authorized, should it, or council is authorized, should you choose to impose an additional 0.1% of 1% criminal justice sales tax. So first part of this thing, we hire 4 entry-level officers. We reimburse for 75% of salary, benefits for 2 years. And then the 0.1% of 1% is sort of considered. And when you read into this thing, the design of the package, and this is why I think like people like Senator Mike Chapman didn't agree with it. They're designed to be in combination, like one supports the other because, you've just hired 4 new people. Yeah, you have retirements and stuff, but it would be pretty short term. So they really were designed to work together. But Director Carrizosa is going to take you through some of the numbers here.
Thank you, Chief Smith, and good evening, Madam Mayor, City Council. Thank you. So as mentioned, this is a great and very unique grant opportunity, not one that we typically see for public safety funding. And so it's really important for us to take some time to consider this. And so like many grants the city does accept, this does have a 25% grant match requirement. And there are a couple of ways that this can be offset in the city's budget. So the first is the 0.1% of 1% criminal justice sales tax that's been identified through House Bill 2015. And so this is allowed as part of that legislation. We estimate that this will collect approximately $510,000 per year, and that's based on our 2025 collection for the prior year. Additional savings are also expected in overtime that could also offset the costs of that grant match. And so just looking at each of those options to cover that grant match requirement, starting with the sales tax. The implementation of this tax, again, is a 0.1% of 1%. This is an additional criminal justice sales tax. So I just want to make that clear. This is not the current criminal justice sales tax that we already have in place. This would be in addition to that with the same requirements. And so it must substantially support the criminal justice system and criminal justice services. However, there is one difference, and that is that it does also require yearly reporting on the policy requirements that Chief Smith went over. And so that's something that we would be required to do on that portion of the 0.1% of 1% for criminal justice sales tax. Additionally, if the ordinance or resolution is authorized for this increase prior to June 30th, 2028, that can be done councilmanically. So this can be adopted through that ordinance and applied and implemented. However, if that approval occurs after the June 30th, 2028 date, the increase would require voter approval. So it would go through still as an ordinance or resolution, and then it would go on to the ballot for voter approval after June 30th, 2028. And so what this looks like in accordance with state law, sales tax increases may only occur on January 1st, April 1st, or July 1st of each year. And notice of the change, including the adopted ordinance and resolution, are required to be submitted to the Department of Revenue a minimum of 75 days prior to the effective date of collection. And so what this means is the soonest the city could implement the sales tax increase would be January 1st, 2027. And the submittal to Department of Revenue would be required on October 18th. So what is included here are the tax collection dates for each year, and then what that would look like for each of those next dates. So again, the soonest would be October 18th, 2026 to have that resolution or ordinance to Department of Revenue for the increase starting January 1st, and then January 16th, 2027 for an April 1st increase, or April 17th, 2027 for a July 1st increase. And so what we've tried to do here is also estimate what our first year costs for funding for new officers would look like. And so while the grant funding allows for 75% of salaries and benefits for those 4 officers, there are also many other critically important equipment needs for these officers, including life safety equipment and training. And so this table is really designed to identify what each of those items would be. We estimate that that's about just shy of $1.1 million in that first year. Of that, a grant funding would be $392,500. So that's the $785,000 split over the 2-year course. And so the reason why we see such a large cost increase in year 1 is because we will need to purchase new equipment. So this includes radios, body-worn cameras, vests, uniforms, mobile data terminals, cell phones, and training for the Basic Law Enforcement Academy. The summary that's included here also includes costs to purchase an additional 4 vehicles for these officers. And so that's where the bulk of a lot of this spending is coming from. And so the amount that wouldn't be covered by the grant in that first year is roughly $700,000. And it also may be possible for us to utilize some of the police vehicles planned for surplus in our 2026 year through our CFP process for a period of time that would reduce the initial costs. However, it is recommended that we do move forward with the purchase of vehicles to prevent growing costs for repairs and maintenance as we keep those vehicles well past their service life.
Serena, are you open to a question real quick?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Amy, go ahead.
Thank you, because I will totally forget. On the previous slide, it says training. Yep.
Yes.
Training for let's say $40,000. And I thought that the grant also had opportunities for funding the training for the new officers. This is above and beyond what they would.
The grant allows for that. That was something that we could have submitted for. However, what we received in our award was strictly for personnel.
Thanks.
So just looking at the recurring costs. So this would be after year 1, what our costs would look like. And so you can see they go down substantially because we do not have those vehicle replacements. So they total about $661,700. Again, $392,500 from our grant. And so that leaves about $269,200 of city funding that would be required as part of that grant match program. And so before we move on to the other option for savings with overtime, this slide does just demonstrate what those total costs would look like if we were to move forward with implementation of the new sales tax. And so where in the second year, the additional funds could be used to return funding that we used in the first year. So you can see we took our total expenses, we removed our grant funding, and again, we get back to where we were with those slides of about $700,000 in that first year. That would be for the city's general fund, recurring costs about $269 in that recurring year or the second year. If we include our sales tax estimates of $510,000 each year, the total cost to the city with that tax would be about $186,700 in that first year. That includes the purchase of 4 additional vehicles. In the second year, or in the recurring years, we would actually have a savings of about $248,000. And so that could be used to go back into the police department for criminal justice services. It could also be used to replenish the costs that were in that first year as well. So that $186,000, we could work that into the budget to make that happen. And so, while it's never easy to talk about increases, we do want to think about affordability, and that's something that we do each time that we're presenting something like this for council consideration. And so we do estimate that the additional 0.1% increase would be about a $21 increase per household per year. And so that is the cost for the additional 4 officers as planned if we were to move forward with the safety or the public safety tax. And so the other option that we do have to offset that 25% grant match requirement is to look at our estimated savings through overtime. And so we have a 3-year average in the police department for overtime. We did exclude grant funding that we do receive for overtime for certain purposes. So that's been excluded here. It was about $475,000, and that's a 3-year average. So it's pretty significant. This is due to call volume, officer injuries, leave, the need to meet minimum staffing levels, and these could have largely been prevented if we had additional staffing resources available. And so it's difficult to put a number to what that savings could look like because overtime does fluctuate year over year depending on the circumstances, but we did want to provide you with an idea of what that cost savings could be. So for every 200 hours of overtime, which typically is paid out in double time due to the contract requirements. So for every 200 hours of double time that we save, that's approximately $25,000 to the city's budget. And so that's just to kind of give you an idea of what that could look like on those savings. And so I will turn the time back over to Chief Smith.
So thank you. So the way it works for us is we have 3 officer minimum staffing all the time, with the exception of Friday and Saturday night where we have 4, many years behind why that minimum staffing. We've got live witnesses to tell you that that's barely enough. And this slide, which apparently is everybody's favorite slide, inspiration for me saying the first or the 4 officers head above water was actually Councilmember Hodgson, who looked at me probably a month ago and said, "You guys are just kind of treading water, right, on your staffing?" And I said, "That's actually a pretty good analogy. I might have to use that." I didn't tell him that, but I thought that. Recently, one of the injured officers on Red Squad returned, and the sergeant on that squad, Sergeant Stamen, told me, "That's great because I just eliminated 220 hours of scheduled shift coverage overtime." And that kind of stuff, those kind of eye-watering costs, Kristen will attest, cause me to lose sleep at night. There's things I can't control. It's, but it's coverage. It's literally bodies on the street because of all the other mandates we have to do. And it just is what it is, but it's very expensive. But Corporal Kyle Cooper is here, and I think he can give you kind of like what this slide actually means from real experience, probably from this week. So I'll have him come up and kind of take you through that.
Good evening, Council, Mayor, City leaders. My name is Kyle Cooper. I'm a corporal with PAPD. I've been here about 13 years. So I've heard a lot of talk so far about numbers. Well, I'm here tonight to tell you I'm a human representing some of those numbers. When we talk about 3 officers being survival, when we say survival, or treading water, it's kind of like treading water with all of this equipment on. Being a 3-person crew, which means me and 2 other officers, it takes one minor incident to pull all three of us out of rotation. That's 1 car accident, 1 domestic violence, 1 anything that requires more than 2. And we have no other police officers to respond to other emergencies. That means any other citizen here in the city of Port Angeles won't be able to access our services because all of the police officers in the city are busy with 1 call. Most officers go to about 20 calls a day per officer on your standard, somewhat busy day. Sometimes it goes up into the 30s per officer per day. So the human cost of this overtime is fatigue, burnout, wear and tear. Under all this equipment, we are not robots. We are just your neighbors, your friends, just like any other human beings. We need to eat, we need to sleep, we need to drink water. This minimum staffing with 3 officers generally means I will not be eating a hot meal today. I do not know when I will be able to use the restroom. I do not know when I will be back to the office. It's not a sustainable number, unfortunately. When we get up into the 4s and 5s, we are treading water. We are barely keeping our heads above water. That means there's less calls stacked on the board that might allow us to provide our services to community members faster with a better response time with additional officers. 5s and 6s is where we should be. That would allow us to provide the best service we can to our citizens. All of us work extremely hard, but there's only 3 of us for our entire city. We believe in the city, we work for the city, we're passionate about the city, but we can't split ourselves into multiple pieces to try to respond to calls. So all we can do is go with who we are. It would mean a lot to us for you guys to consider and approve the additional funding for your officers. We could really use the support. We could really use additional police officers to help our citizens and just get to calls. So if you guys have any questions for me, please, by all means, yes.
On TV, everybody in a police car drives fast and they go to all these calls and they make arrests, and then the episode ends 60 minutes later. That's probably not a fair representation, I'm guessing.
That's correct. I personally don't believe I would watch a police show if it was just somebody sitting at a computer typing for 4 hours straight.
Now, about that, when you dedicate time to report writing, that's necessary. That's a necessary function.
Yes.
But that takes you off of the road for a certain amount of time. But what I've heard somebody say was that when you write that report needs to stand the test of time. It needs to be able to go before a judge today, an appellate court a year from now, and maybe 2 years from now, a Supreme Court judge. So talking about increasing the number of officers, one thing that I think gets left by the wayside, like in movies and TV, is the importance of being able to sit down and write an accurate, concise report that stands the test of time so that a defendant gets their day in court and they are, all of the facts are presented in that time that represents the most accurate account of what happened.
It's
Is that fair to say?
absolutely as true as it can be. Unfortunately, the TV shows show the very cool stuff. What they don't show is all the additional work that has to go into the back end for us to prepare legal technical documents for court, for us to sometimes testify at court, for us to get equipment in order. The TV shows don't show any of that, but that is a lot of work on the back end that most people don't know exists.
Or can I ask one more? Okay. First of all, before I ask this question, I just want to recognize our ladies that are here. I love the fact that there's 3, and my daughter wants to be a police officer. So I hope she can sit down with you guys. The last one I have is sort of like proactive time. So you spent a lot of time going calls to calls, and that's what I brought up to the chief and said, "She seems like you're just keeping your head above water." But the addition of proactive time allows you to address complaints like speed or distracted driving or DUIs. So in a case like tonight, if one of your officers arrested a DUI, that would bring your staffing levels down when they need to respond with more than one officer to something like a DV. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And how long does it usually take to process a DUI?
It depends on what the state of the person is in, or what state that person is in. Sometimes they could require medical treatment. Sometimes they could require additional clearances at the hospital. So it really depends. It could be anywhere from an hour to 3, 4, 5 hours that person isn't there to support their partners. And if an emergency does come out, it is our job to respond to those, and we will go. Sometimes you have to go alone. That is the reality of working with 3 officers. It is our job to try to protect the city and the citizens. And there are times where we will have to go to calls alone because people are tied up.
Well, thank you. And Chief, you've got a superstar here. You're very articulate. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions before I?
Yeah, we'll go to Amy. But
Yeah.
really quickly, I just was
I
going to
opened the
say,
door, so here we go.
I appreciate your kindness to TV shows because I've actually turned a couple off because I'm like, that is just ridiculous. That doesn't happen. And I told the chief one time about a show I was watching. He's like, Kate, don't watch that stuff. So anyway, just made me think of that. Amy, go ahead.
I just, a couple of questions. My first question is there anything else that you are aware of, and this can be for anyone, that would be as impactful?
For the city as a whole, I think currently public safety is a cornerstone, and I think our cornerstone is starting to crack. Without these additional reinforcements, I don't think we could continue going forward as a city without at least bringing public safety into a huge light and saying this is important to us. We need our community members to feel safe. So I think at this time, at this juncture, we need to focus on public safety and put that in the spotlight until eventually we can focus on other things. But if people don't feel safe, they can't thrive. Go ahead.
Okay, my other question's going to come out all wrong, but it's Amy, and that's normally how I do things. So I have a nephew who is in law enforcement in a different state. And him and his colleagues fight for overtime. And when it's not available, right, like it's like oh, well, now I can't I can't make my payment or what have you. Without coming off totally condescending, are there feelings like that locally?
The funny thing about that is it is the opposite. It's too much. It is almost like being hit with a fire hose on a regular basis. And it's not overtime sometimes that you can deny. I could be trying to have family dinner and set something up with my father, my mother, and my wife. And all of a sudden I get a phone call saying, you have to come to work. It's called being mandatory, and it's awful. That means drop what you're doing, come to work, the city needs you. And we answer that call almost every day, almost every week. Somebody is answering that call saying, you are coming to work because our numbers are so disastrously low. And that's a bitter pill to swallow for as a human is, hey, I know you had plans. I know you looked forward to it all weekend. You worked really hard. Come back to work. So no, we are not struggling and fighting overtime. We're struggling for time off. Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank
Yes.
you. Drew, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just curious, if we do get if council approves the grant for the 4 additional officers, where does that actually put us on the staffing levels? I realize it's not, 4, well, 3 plus 4 is 7. That's not how that works. I realize that. So where would that actually put us on this chart?
So realistically, if we got 4 officers, I believe that'd put us up into the 5s and 6s. That would be, you would have 6 patrol officers working. That allows for additional community engagement, additional proactive activities. There are so many different things that police officers can do when we have the time. Unfortunately, time right now is something we just can't make. We are just going call to call, so we can't do any of these extracurricular things that we want to do for the community. All we can do right now is take calls. That's about it. I believe getting the extra 4 would put us in the 5 to 6. Does anybody else have any questions?
I just want to make a quick comment that I appreciate you taking the time to come and speak and having you guys nodding with. For folks online, we have other officers in the audience that you can't see, but they are nodding along. Because I think it's really important, and maybe this is a better comment for later, but since you're standing here, I think really valuable to hear. I mean, certainly there's the financial cost of overtime, but it doesn't seems like we have an obligation. I feel like we have an obligation to also be good employers. And right now we're not being very good employers for you all because it is because of our staffing levels, your quality of life is impacted. And I think if you can confirm for me, I don't want to make assumptions, but I suspect that not only is it frustrating to be sitting down for the birthday dinner that you get mandated away from, it's also frustrating to not be able to be proactive, to just be reactionary because you don't get, it's all hard work. There's no fun work. And so, I mean, I'm sure some cases are interesting and all of that, but I think everyone should get a little bit of joy in their work. And it feels like right now the pace at which you all are working is not providing that at all. So seems to me like this is a good opportunity for us to maybe build in a little bit of that. And of course, it's going to take some time because we probably won't have 4 people just show up out of the woodwork. But I don't know, maybe you all have been working on Friends. So,
Mayor, I appreciate that acknowledgement. It means a lot to us. And it means a lot to me personally for you to hear my voice and to hear what we're going through. As I said, we are your friends, we are your neighbors. And the police officers in the city of Port Angeles are the best I've ever worked with. I mean, they truly, deeply care about this community. And it's not something that we want to take lightly and burn out, which will happen on our current track. So please, if you take anything away from this evening, please allow us to get these 4 additional officers. It would mean the world to us.
thank you.
Thank you.
John, go ahead. Hold on, don't walk away yet.
Okay.
Go ahead, John.
Sir.
Thanks. My question is just, we're talking about being proactive. I'm just curious, can you give some examples about what that would look like to our community? Like if we were to get these 4 officers and we were able to do 5 or 6, what do you guys envision that would look like? How would that help us? Because I know in my job, being proactive is really important, right? Mm-hmm. So I just want to hear your thoughts on what that would look like, what else we could do extra to help our community feel safe and be proactive.
Yeah, absolutely. And proactive, when we say it, usually people think, they're going to go out and they're going to do all these traffic stops and they're going to do all. Yes, that is part of it. We could specifically run traffic emphases, watching for speeders, speed monitoring in school zones, checking for DUIs, but there's so much more when it comes to being proactive. There's also community engagement factors that we haven't even discussed. Coffee with a cop. We don't have time for it right now. We can barely sit down before we have to go to our next call. Talking about community meetings, potentially setting things up in the future for more community engagement. All of that takes time to plan. And if your primary job is patrol, all we're doing is call to call. But when I say proactive work, when it comes to police work, speed emphasis, traffic emphasis, DUI emphasis, patrolling areas that are known to have high crime, making social contacts, business checks at night, the options are almost endless. So instead of being responsive as we are right now, we could try to get ahead of this and prevent crime or find things that are happening in the act before they're completed. It would at least allow us to get ahead of some things instead of just essentially mopping up the pieces, when it's all done.
I appreciate that. I think it's important to hear it and say it out loud. So if people are watching or listening later, they can kind of get a sense of how important this would be. So appreciate you elaborating on that.
Thank you.
Latricia.
So my question is, thanks for the question about proactive. It's kind of in that way, but more about right now we have to prioritize calls. And I guess how might bumping up to 6 officers change the police department's priorities when it comes to responding to calls and have like like internally, not just the proactive policing that you talked about, but kind of a standing prioritization policy when responding to calls. So I'm kind of wondering how 6 officers, what that would look like. And also, does 6 officers eliminate overtime? I guess my question would be, how many officers eliminates overtime?
I can't answer how many people would eliminate overtime. I mean, if we could get 20 more, that'd be great, but I don't think that's on the table. So I think there's always going to be overtime in police work. Unfortunately, I'm not a finance person. I'm not a mathematician, but I'm sure there's a number out there, but I can't testify to it because I don't know. But when it comes to how would 6 officers on the schedule currently versus 3 officers work for call volume, I can't testify to that. First of all, with having 6 officers, you're going to be able to dispatch officers to multiple different calls, reducing all the wait times. Even if there's 3 severe 911 calls at a time, that could mean 1 officer going to each of one of those 911 calls. That's dangerous for us. That's dangerous for the public. It decreases our response value. With 6, you might have a partner with you. You might have 2 partners with you. You might have 3 partners with you. But realistically, what we usually find ourselves in is a cascade of medium to low priority calls that are cold, meaning there's no suspect on scene, nobody's being injured, the scene has already kind of stabilized. However, when the hot calls do come out, meaning somebody is being hurt, somebody is hurt, or there's a severe impact to the city, that takes all 3 of our officers that currently work on shift. So if we had 6, even though that high priority incident is occurring, 3 officers could respond to it. We would still have 3 more to respond to calls or provide immediate assistance to those officers on the active scene.
So maybe another question I have is, I'm not in your guys' world, and what you guys do on a daily basis is, it's a lot that you do. You can't put it into terms, but so that still leaves people to respond to other calls. I guess how many on a daily basis, you say an officer responds 20 to 30 calls a day, possibly. How many of those are high priority calls where like 10% of that?
I'd say we probably respond to at least 2 high priority calls a day. That could be, and that can vary. That can be an in-progress domestic violence call with a weapon, and somebody is being injured right here, right now, and we need to help. Or it could be a car accident where everybody is okay, but there's 4 cars spread across the entire roadway, and the entire highway is blocked. That is high priority. So it does vary, but I'd say we go to, at a minimum, probably 2 of those a day, and sometimes they're happening simultaneously, and sometimes it's more than 2 all at once.
And can I jump in just because I listen to the radio enough? I think your definition of high priority is technical versus how many calls are people expecting that an officer is going to show up within the next few minutes. And I think that's the piece to me that you didn't ask me, Latricia, I know, but I think from a community expectation perspective, I think there's like obviously a car accident, people need to go, but I think there are lots of other calls that they don't consider, that don't qualify from your technical definition of high priority, but that our community members expect an officer is going to be there within a few minutes.
Yeah. Yep. Back to you, Chief. Thank you.
So, Councilmember, I think I spent time answering that question quite a bit, and the world that Corporal Cooper just painted for you, we rely on other agencies to back us up far more than we provide help for them. So, LWA Police, deputies, National Park Rangers. So how we fill in those high priority calls is often either other agencies or our backup is them. But the things that drive our workload, the things that keep these people here for 13, 14 hours a day, the calls they require, Councilmember Hodgson said it, the report writing, the arrests, the search warrants, the processing of evidence. That's the main driver of our work. Like I got a complaint the other day from somebody that said, I reported somebody passed out in an alley and officers drove by and the person was laying there and they didn't get out of their car. They just kept going. And then 3 hours later, officers came back with fire and EMS because the person was in an overdose. And I actually don't know if the officer even saw that person, but think about what you just had described to you, and you've got other calls waiting for you. So you just addressed that call of somebody, it's a welfare check in an alley, possible overdose. So you drove down, you looked, you didn't see anything, but you're not going to spend a lot of time there because you got to go to 3 more things that are waiting for you. It's the calls that are stacked up that are waiting for you. They're really all high priority, and without ratting them out too much, back in 2016, we had an officer-involved shooting, and we had a really big staffing problem, and Chief Vieta was a patrol sergeant at the time, and we had the worst staffing I've ever seen. I think at one point we were down to like 9 to 10 non-deployable, and our his patrol team worked kind of nonstop for a month. So they came to work 12 hours on, 12 hours off, and Chief Vieta was handling a lot of these calls by clicking and just closing them out on the computer because we were never going to get there. We never got any complaints. And he has, if you know Jason, he's got a knack for really good judgment on what calls that we're not going to get there. And so he just shut them down and there he went. But Chief Vieta has been here for 32 years with PAPD, and he started in a different world. And I kind of wanted him to kind of add on to Corporal Cooper about where, like, answer to your question, Councilmember Suggs, about what the change from 11 people per patrol team, 2 patrol teams, to 13 and what it does. And it's an 19% increase, but it's actually a lot more than that. It's like geometric value added, but I'll let Jason kind of dive into that a little bit.
Thank you. He was not supposed to tell you about all that pointing and clicking. That was totally ad-libbed. All right, back to what we're talking about. I think sometimes people have a hard time saying, "Wait a minute, how is it that you have 33 officers and you're struggling to keep 3 on?" And so, just briefly, how we're organized. We have a chief, a deputy chief. We have an operations sergeant that's running all of our training programs, supervising code enforcement, supervising the downtown resource officer. He's going to get us accredited in his spare time, and then we park all the things that nobody has time for on his to-do list as well. We have 6 people assigned to the detective division, and you know what they handle. They handle suspicious death and crimes against children, and when one of them is the school resource officer, but when their numbers dip below that, what happens is you have serious crimes that are reported, the patrol officer takes a brief report, and there's no detective available, and the case goes in a drawer. Nobody likes that. There's a child in Port Angeles that's been seriously victimized, and the case is sitting in a drawer. I think that is outrageous, and it's not going to work for us to say redeploy one of the detectives to somewhere else. Yes, we have 1 downtown resource officer. We have 1 school resource officer, and Chief Smith mentioned Sergeant Staming cut in some overtime. Well, how we did that was pulling those special assignments back to patrol to fill in, and that prevents us from ruining somebody's weekend or worse. And so, that's how we've sort of been burning the candle at both ends and moving the chess pieces around. Only we're running out of chess pieces, or we never had anybody or enough to begin with. And so, remember that the 11 officers that are on these patrol shifts, that makes 22. There's 2 patrol shifts. They're covering 24 hours a day. So they have staggered start times, but we have to keep those 3 cars on, or 4 cars on the weekend nights, 24 hours a day. And so currently we have 1 person that's waiting to go to the academy. We have 2 people that are in the academy. We have 1 person with a hurt knee. We have 1 person with a hurt back. These are all people that are not deployable. We have other people who use family leave, and I'm not against using family leave. All I'm saying is that it takes away from the deployability of our department. And it used to be taken in one chunk. And so you could sort of predict, the baby arrives here and the family leaves happens, and then we're all back to work. And now it's different. It's taken at random intervals, a week here, a week there. That's not a complaint. All I'm saying is my job is to deploy police officers, and I have to play the hand that's dealt me. So some of these human elements do affect my ability to make these numbers add up. I think we've talked about how we would deploy these officers. It's simple: one on day shift red, one on day shift blue, one on night shift red, one on night shift blue. That's 4. We're talking a little bit about the mandatory overtime, and I want to re-emphasize what Kyle said. We talk a lot about officer wellness. That I am glad that we are talking about that. And so we put the officers' duty days on a calendar and their training days on a calendar. And then the rest of it is wellness/family days. And so the family at home takes that and starts to make plans. And like you said, those plans get very interrupted, and there's not a choice most of the time. Also, any wellness program that you look up anywhere talks about having a non-negotiable bedtime. I can barely say that without laughing, because a lot of the overtime that comes in is without regard to the officer's sleep-wake cycle. And so they might be on a night shift, and they are like, okay, I'm going to try to sleep and keep my schedule consistent. And then they get overtime that's mandatory right in the middle of when they were trying to sleep. And the special assignment people are not immune from this. So for example, detectives, we've talked about them already, and we give them the most important cases of, I need you to solve this suspicious death. I need you to solve this crime against a child. I need you to hold these offenders accountable. This is terrible. We can't have it in our society. And on your weekend, I need you to come in and work night shift. And so Monday morning, we have detectives that are kind of in this fog. Okay, get back to work. It's really important. And I'm sorry you had to work mandatory overtime. Not exaggerating. It happens. And that's the way it is. I'm not complaining about it. I'm just saying that's the way it is. And we've talked a little bit about how do we get that other 25%. We've talked about some of the overtime savings that are out there. And yes, it's true. I know I can reduce that expenditure of double time. And just to make sure everybody understands what that is, we're paying double for 1 hour of labor. And often the person that we're paying has a family at home that's upset with them and is really tired and just trying to get through the day or the night. And so that's where we are right now. I know we can do better. I know I can reduce that expenditure. I want to talk a little bit about efficiency. Imagine that you have to sit down and write 3 pages on a topic. Just sit down and write 3 pages on a topic. No problem. That won't take long. But when you get constantly interrupted, that takes you a long time. And so in theory, when we have these additional officers, they will be able to sit down and say, I'm out on report writing. I'm just going to sit down and I'm going to type and I'm going to get my thoughts down on paper and I'm going to be done. And you know as well as I do that when you get interrupted, you have to recollect your thoughts. It's terribly inefficient. And you asked about DWI, and what I know on weekend nights is if I could catch a drunk right after bar break, my shift ended at 7 a.m. And I would have to really struggle to get through that BAC, get through the booking, and get all my reports done, and get all that faxed to DOL. That's what we had to do then. And it was usually about 13 pages. But that was before, when they refused, we were writing a search warrant and taking them to the hospital to draw blood. And also, the jail was different back then. Yes, there were times when we had to get people medically cleared for incarceration, but it didn't happen nearly as frequently, and it didn't happen nearly as often. Anyway, just some different times that have happened. Some people mentioned, what about the grant, and could it have funded this? And Why did you write it that way or whatever? And so it's a competitive process. I knew what the grant could, in theory, allow, but I wrote it in a way that I hoped that the state of Washington would say, yes, we'll fund that. And I started sweating a little bit when Kent wrote faster than I did, and they got 20 officers, and I was kind of thinking, leave some for the rest of us. And so it's nothing bad about my friends over in Kent. I'm sure they can put those 20 officers to work in Kent. But I wrote it the way I wrote it, and they said yes. What did they say yes to? What I said I would do was, with these 4 officers, once we have the new people hired in the academy through field training and deployed, I would select experienced officers, and they would be designated crisis response officers, and they would address some of the people in crisis that we have in our community. And why did I do that? I've heard loud and clear from our stakeholders. I believe in community-oriented policing. I believe in police officers being part of the solution and help to solve the problems that are unique to that community. And what I've heard loud and clear is clean up this mess. I don't care about your staffing problems. I don't want to hear about success, about excuses. Just solve this problem. Well, my plan is to hire these 4 officers and then to designate 4 senior officers specifically as a collateral duty into solving this problem. But at the same time, they're also going to be part of minimum staffing so that we can keep them on a set schedule, pay them 1 hour of pay for 1 hour of work, and quit ruining everybody else's wellness program and family time. I know that we're up against the clock, so I wanted to talk quickly. I don't want to take away from my boss because he still has one more slide. But if you have questions, we are all happy to answer them. And perhaps you can say, well, I have a question for so-and-so, or I have a question for him.
Before we move on, Navarra has her hand up, and I apologize, Navarra. I didn't see it until just now. So I don't know if you just put it up or not, but go ahead with your question.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I am on my phone because my computer's having trouble connecting. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I apologize. I'm going to figure out the video in a sec. I really appreciate this presentation. I've been trying to hold my questions till the end, but it seems like maybe we're about at the end. In advance, I understand, I totally understand the importance of having enough people on shift. I understand the importance of making sure that, folks aren't, too tired to make mistakes. I understand that. And I also, it sounds like we've been awarded the grant successfully. Am I correct in that?
Yes, we just have to put it on a council agenda to accept it.
Okay. Well, frankly, I find it a little surprising that our application was funded because I read through the bill that passed the legislature and was signed, and I've pulled up AWC's funding priorities, and there is a co-response priority. It says top funding priority goes to grant applications to start co-response or community immersion law enforcement programs. Second priority goes to agencies with existing co-response programs, and then applications from all other agencies get next priority. And so I think it's great that we are getting this, but we no longer have the rediscovery program housed within the city of Port Angeles. Our co-response model is really now through the fire department, is my understanding, since the county is hosting rediscovery, though I know we continue to work closely with them. And so, I would have really liked to see where I'm going with this is that I would have really liked to see us actually create a grant opportunity that aligns with those grant priorities. It sounds like maybe the intention when this bill was passed versus the actual reality of what they've funded is different. And that's not our fault in any way. But what I will say is that I'm hoping that the funding, if we decide, and I think we should, vote to authorize Council Manically the 0.1% sales tax, I'm hoping that we can have a conversation about what kinds of things we'd like to fund with that. And I'm hoping that, especially in light of what's been shared tonight, particularly in response to the conversation around having enough staffing and, kind of being treading water, and the conversation around, preventing crimes, I think is really done through upstream approaches. And that's a sort of a historic approach we've taken, and I'm sure something that we want to continue to do as well. So I'm hoping that after we essentially are able to pay ourselves back, that we look at making sure that those dollars can go towards our upstream approaches, such as a behavioral health response team, or through the community paramedic program, or what have you, the day car, and be mindful that there are, I think when we address those upstream avenues, it also leads to better outcomes downstream as well. Sorry, I know that was really long. Chief, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I want to direct your question, and I appreciate it. So, and I apologize if I sound a little strident here. I want to be really clear about something. We didn't give up any of our co-response. When the county took over rediscovery, that was a decision that we made with the sheriff's department. We added to rediscovery. We added to OPCC. We didn't give up any of the co-response. The community paramedic program, Project Shielding Hope, we're actually a part of that program, which is why Chief Vieta attached the collateral duty crisis response. It's a thing. We're trained extensively in the state of Washington. The state of Washington has decided to train us all as crisis responders. 2028, we're mandated to all have 40 hours of crisis response. In addition to all the de-escalation training, all the other training. We're the only people out on the street that have the authority to take people into custody for Involuntary Treatment Act. There's nobody else that can make them go. We do that. So when we look around, like the co-response capability we have, it's robust, and PBH, which is the mental health provider, is expanding their programs pretty systematically. They have 24-hour crisis response. I know they've got some vacancies, but they work very well with us. And like I see them actually sort of adding to their footprint. But I'll leave it to the rest of the council here to figure out where the gaps are. I think we made our case, but I want to make a real clear point about co-response. Like, rediscovery is something that we started. We fought for it. We advocated for it. It's part of us. None of that changed because it's got management by the county. So I think I understand what you're looking for in terms of upstream. And the last thing I would add to that is police presence, downtown resource officer, foot patrol, bike patrol. That's upstream right there. That's community policing. That's problem-oriented policing. And when we had Officer Balderson in the outreach job for a year, he was grant funded. He was connected directly to Project Operation Shielding Hope. He had those connections with the community paramedics and the outreach people, rediscovery lead teams. We have 2 lead teams here, by the way, plus PBH. If I add up all these bodies, they're more than us in law enforcement. But my point about it is Officer Balderson was doing meaningful work because he was staying behind as really the program was designed by PA Fire. They were the lead, but one of the spokes in the wheel was us. So what Chief Vieta did in this grant app, and if you read the kind of like their priorities, we already had co-response. So we can't establish something we already have. But I mean, the second tier, we think we wrote it in a way that met those requirements, and they awarded us the funding for 4 officers. So I provided a pretty long answer to that as well. And I think I'm almost out of time here, so I'm going to just jump on to the last thing is just next steps. And council on May 5th has the opportunity to accept this grant. I think we'll have a council memo for that, and obviously there'll be some discussion after we're done. And of course, additional council discussion and direction regarding the 1/10 of 1%. So thank you all for your time.
Thank you
for your great questions.
Amy has a question. I'm gonna let you ask your question, and then I think we should take a 5-minute break and come back for council discussion and likely more questions.
Okay. I will keep some comments then for later and just ask my question. Here I go. I'm organized. This might actually be a question for your training captain.
So he's here.
I know that the grant came with, I feel like I went to a webinar on this grant like 3 years ago. So I have some background information. And at that time, it sounded like there was going to be some training requirements attached to the grant. And my understanding was we were meeting all of them anyway, except for there was one that they hadn't created yet. So I guess my question is, how much of an impact on the training? I know you keep saying 40 hours, but there's other things in there I feel like that.
So to speed up the meeting of the requirements, and Sergeant Ryan is the one that has to manage that. We had 25% of us had already been through crisis intervention training. So we met that requirement. And then we had the policy changes. We all had to train to them. I mean, one of the policy requirements is we have to read, do an immigration and consular notification of everybody we arrest. We have to train to that policy. And the other, like we have to prove that we're training to these things. So it's taken a little bit of like time and energy and focus to make sure we're meeting all this. And as Director Carrizosa said, if we take the grant, we have to do proofs like an accreditation. And if you do the sales tax, it'll be essentially forever that we'll have to do that. There's 16 hours of online training that we have to get done. It's in this thing called ACADIS, and we've been sort of doing it when that was required, but we, in the grant requirements, have to have it done by the end of the year. So we're shooting for the end of September. And unfortunately, that's going to be overtime. Officers are going to be on overtime doing that. And it's 16 hours, but it's pretty time intensive, and it's not some of the stuff we would have picked. But we're just following what they're requiring us to do. Does that answer your question?
I guess what I'm trying to get at is I know that like it's not just hiring for new officers. There's like a lot of new oversight, and that new oversight is not going to be just on those 4 officers, right? And so I guess
Well, so tracking, Sergeant Ryan, in terms of the training tracking, we're already there. Council Member Schwab asked recently about the auditor's report, which I didn't realize agencies weren't complying, but then I thought about it. If you're not accredited, there's no penalty. And if you can't, like this universe exists for many departments in the state, how are they going to meet all those requirements? So yeah, the state auditor said they didn't meet it. Well, we actually do meet it. And I think I gave you a really long answer it's not simple. And like training,
I basically just wanted yes or no to find out.
Yeah,
I got a really nice thesis. So I appreciate it though. I like thoroughness.
But I didn't really know like where you were going with it. So I wanted you to get the whole picture. Just the LETAXA training, which is a whole nother thing. We had to send 4 people, or actually 5 people, to 80 hours of training, and they instruct. And Sergeant Ryan instructs. Corporal Cooper is one of them. So if you're doing 24 hours of training, that's 2 to 3 hours of prep per. So that's built into all of this. And I think Chief Vietta's got more on this.
I hustled through my slides trying to make time. And then you asked a question that you might not have otherwise asked had I slowed down and said what I planned to say. I'll give you an example of the updated patrol tactics training. One of the main themes is team up and slow down. There have been some videos across the nation that people didn't like to see. And one of the things that happened is officers rush into things. And so one of the tactics is team up and slow down. And that sounds great. And the intent is great. While we are slowing down, the calls are stacking up on the MDT and the reports are not being written, and our shift is ended and we're on overtime. And as far as team up, we're asking for more officers, because in order to team up with someone, they have to exist. And I don't mean to be flippant, but the tactic was awesome, but it kind of became an empty platitude when we were spread as thin as we have been from time to time. So team up and slow down is one of the tactics. We would like to do that. Slow down to handle this call while we have enough of us to do it, but also all the other calls in the whole city don't have to wait. Other officers can respond to those calls and handle them now. And this is, nobody calls the police to make an appointment. I mean, everybody that calls the police doesn't say, I want the police to come right now. It's assumed, come right now. And so we're just asking for the officers to allow us to implement the reform that we've been told to implement. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's take a 5-minute break. Hopefully you guys can stick around because I don't know that we'll have questions that all of you can answer, but you might be interested in our discussion anyway. Thank you for being here. And so 5-minute break. We'll be back in just a couple minutes. We need to get back to it so we have time for our discussion and or questions. All right. So I will quickly refer back to next steps. May 5th council meeting. That's next Tuesday. We will have this on the agenda, but tonight's a good opportunity if you have more questions, thoughts, etc. So, anyone have questions that they haven't asked or comments that they want to make? Drew, and then Mark.
Yeah, I had a finance related question. Looking at slide 12 with what the recurring costs are, we show that the less the 0.1% sales tax estimate is about 510, which would give us I'm just gonna say leftover because it's late at night. I'm forgetting my accounting terms, but a leftover of 240. Hypothetically, how many officers can I get for that?
2, hypothetically. And that would just be salaries and benefits, just to be clear. Yeah.
Okay. Hypothetically, if we waited the 2 years, because that's how long the current grant lasts for, is for the first 2 years. If we hold that for 2 years, then use that money to pay for the initial cost of the officers, because I recognize the acquisition costs for the officers are going to be more expensive than the reoccurring salaries. Would that have enough funding to then pay for the recruitment of 2 new officers, and then the remaining funds for the future years would then be enough to pay for the salaries of those 2 officers? Am I doing that all correctly in my head?
So essentially banking the leftover amount from, it is possible. I will say costs are increasing, particularly relative to vehicles. And so it is possible. Yeah.
All right, Mark.
I had something else, but let me follow up on that. So the cost of an officer is roughly 0 to 5 years. I'm not sure what the increments are, is roughly 500,000 with all training equipment. Is that correct?
I'm going to repeat your question, just to make sure I'm understanding. So are you saying the cost for 5 years?
For one officer, 0 to 5 year officer. So maybe not like a senior officer because pay goes up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what's the total cost of that officer? All their equipment, training, estimated overtime, all of that.
For year 1 or for recurring costs?
Sure. Let's just say year 1. Estimate
would be between $250,000 and $280,000
Okay. And so that's with equipment?
with equipment.
Okay, great. And then if we did this sort of banking method with the surplus, is that sustainable? And you haven't crunched the numbers on it. So is your thought that it may be sustainable?
It may be, but that would be contingent on continuation of the grant funding. So I know Chief Smith mentioned, we have this grant for 2 years. We're hopeful that the state continues that grant funding in the future and that we continue to receive that funding. If we did not, then we would be looking to use some of that sales tax implementation funding. If that were to be the direction that council wanted to go, we would be looking at using that to help offset the costs we didn't collect from the grant, essentially, for the following years.
Sorry, and it wasn't clear. That was actually the question that I wanted to ask, was related to that 0.1 of 1% sales tax, that banking that surplus may allow us an additional officer. There's the possibility.
There is a possibility.
Okay, great. And then the other thing is, I just wanted to make a statement of the longevity, the health, safety, and welfare of our officers and their longevity. There's a lot that goes into being a first responder, and if you've got officers that are getting mandatory overtime a lot, that is detrimental to their health, their mental health, and their roadside manner that you're going to receive as a member of the public. I can think of some officers that were with our department and they left for other careers and may not have if they were able to balance a work and life. If they were to balance both of those a lot more easier than what our officers face right now. So I do just want to point out that officer longevity and welfare that would come with additional officers? Thanks.
So Councilmember, I think your question about sustainability, as a city manager would refer to me as my cowboy math. If you look at those slides and you look at paying yourself back for the investment that you did on the front end for the vehicles and the equipment, it's, $8,000 per class, CJTC. It's about $25,000 for all of this. And it's a vehicle's a vehicle. It's about, maybe 85 or 90,000 totally equipped. If you look at it that way and then you pay yourself back, I think the slides show it, and it shows it actually evens itself out. And then it actually, at some point, goes into surplus territory, which, I don't think we wanted to speculate beyond that. But I think that's the design of the legislation, actually, to make the thing pencil out and to get you, like, unlike a COPS grant, which we've had several over the years, where you get like 2 or 3 years of funding. So you get one person, you hire them, train them, and then that makes up for somebody that retires or leaves. It's still not a bad deal, but this is really designed to kind of elevate your bench strength up. And really, it's the only, I've been here 18 years. I've never seen a funding opportunity like this ever. I mean, that's why we put so much work into this thing. I mean, opportunities like this are really rare, but from a sustainability, like, I wouldn't have written it this way, but I think that's what they were designing, that if you wanted to do it this way, Director Carrizosa said $20 a household. Our cowboy math was 40, but I mean, that's the tax burden. It's there, it's real, but it is, I think the thing was built around, if you did a 3 or 4 year period and you paid your initial stuff back, you even out, and now you have the officers and you have a way to pay them.
So in addition, going back to the sales tax increase, after that first year where it pays itself off effectively, and then you have the opportunity to build a surplus, we discussed the possibility of down the road, maybe that helping to pay for an additional officer. What would be some other uses for that surplus type money that would? I'd
be afraid actually to speculate, only knowing how hard it was to get this far and to get 4. I mean, I'd give you ideas all day long, and like what we just did in Victoria, where we met with Vic PD and Fire and the city in terms of their kind of upstream and their outreach stuff. There's a lot of really valuable things you can do collaborating with. We've got some great partners here already, and like Corporal Cooper said, community policing and problem policing is a lot of different things. I mean, our outreach officer, that was a full-time job, and we established value with it and had a lot of upstream stuff. But I get a little nervous when I think beyond what we can show you on paper as something that's pretty sustainable. But I'm sure we will be glad to work with everybody on, moving ahead on, what next steps.
But getting away from the sustainability portion of, another officer, in addition to what we've talked about, what are some opportunities that can be taken with what we expect to be a surplus? Are there training opopportunities? Are there equipment opportunities, or just something like being able to rotate a vehicle out when it should be rotated out?
So here's what I'd tell you about some of that. We're already overextended in terms of what we've committed to do in terms of our professionalism, from accreditation to our special response team to our training requirements that Sergeant Ryan has to manage, to our crisis response team. I mean, we're the hub of these pretty intense programs that we're required to do. And then our detective division is really the major crimes unit for the whole area. So we're doing that on the backs of like budgets that really weren't written for that. And again, they're back to unfunded mandates. The CASER training the CASER team that we're part of, that's a mandate to have independent investigations. So we're part of the KITSAP team. We respond, we participate, but it's really expensive when we get a call out and we have to manage a case. So one of my things I worry about is all these things we've committed to that actually keep our staff here, they keep morale here. They're professional commitments that provide sort of self-actualization in the job, and you feel like you're doing something meaningful. We're always at the edge of like what our budgets really will allow us to do in those areas. So we balance a lot of things. And, with the last 5 years, I'd say with all the mandates and how we've elevated the quality of these programs, we're really kind of at a precipice there in terms of being able to sustain all that. So that's my second answer.
Amy, go ahead.
Thanks. I have notes all over the place, but I guess there's a couple of points I want to make. And the first one being that PAPD specifically really championed and got behind the support for behavioral health response crisis teams and really became, I can't use a different word, a champion for that, and really got locally the programs, the co-response programs started, right, with rediscovery and the work with the DCRs and stuff. And so it's a little unfortunate that they aren't here to also speak to that partnership tonight. Perhaps they will do that at our next discussion, or I don't want to assume, but I am going to, that they would be very supportive of this. I know that my work with them, it's been shared how great the officers are, how responsive they are to that work. And so what I'm hearing now is that it's your turn, right? Like PAPD took a lot under their wings and changed a lot of their, I don't know about actual policies, but a lot of their working policies in order to get behavioral health response teams off the ground locally. And I think that what we're seeing now is a shortage of officers, right? And I say now because it's in front of us now. I think we saw this before. And so for me, this is an easy yes. I think for the community, it's also an easy yes. I think if we went around with I know fire department go around with their boots, so I don't know what we would do with like a holster or something. But if we went around door to door, getting $21 from each door, super easy sell. I think for me and from the interactions I have with public, also like again, as being an observer for the active, you guys were not calling it the active shooter event, but up at the college recently, something that I don't know if I shared at my report, but something that happened was Chief had to actually say that we're out of law enforcement. Like, what? So I think that's something that we need to know about. Obviously, our public comments are a lot about where's our enforcement. And I think that when we're talking about morale of our officers, like hearing that has got to be shitty. And so hopefully, and I know 4 is awesome, right? Because where we are, it should probably be 8. But if we can increase the officer visibility out there to like have more time to find and proactively enforce laws and perhaps have more time to write good prosecutable reports, that's a word, I'm using that. And when they get the feedback that more is needed, have the time to be able to go get that so that it doesn't just, it's not just a drop, right? Like, okay, whatever. I'm going to shut up because I think a lot of it has already been said, but I'll just be very, very clear. I'm in favor of a councilmanic decision here to start in October. No, to report in October, to start in January, the earliest possible start, and that tax would go towards PAPD and staffing in the future as well. So I think this is a really great opportunity. I appreciate that PAPD went out to get this and did all the behind the scenes work that we're probably not hearing all about to get us ready to accept this and then to get it. As somebody who attended the webinar, again, it feels like 3 years ago. Could it possibly have been? Anyway, at that time, it was very clear from the governor's office that the purpose of this grant was to add more law enforcement officers on the ground. And let's do that. Thanks.
Thank you, Amy. I'm going to go to other folks first, but I'll note that you want to go again. John, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. So I just wanted to put my thoughts out there. So I think over the last couple months, it's been made abundantly clear that our community really wants to see public safety as a top priority, whether it's in the city, in the county. It's, I think, been pretty clear. I do think our capacity is a problem, right? So day one, since I got appointed here, that's what I heard was like, we just don't have the staff. And when I was touring the police station, I mean, we're like, bare bones making it through, right? We got reports, we got video monitoring evidence, bare minimum on the streets. So yeah, that's definitely an issue. So I also think that I like what Mayor Dexter said about employability, and like as a employer, we need to make sure our officers and public safety personnel, law enforcement is taken care of. I mean, I'm a teacher and I'm overworked, but I can't imagine what you guys do, right? So I think well-being is important and burnout's real, right? Especially in a rural community in the middle of nowhere to some people, right? So I think it's important. I think this grant is great and we'd be silly not to accept it. The sales tax, I think, is a good idea too. I want to hear more discussion about it. I know taxes here are a thing that some of our other community members you say that, then like pitchforks come out. So I think I know more of a discussion about it is definitely more clarification on what it is, what it isn't, I think is really important just for our community. Initially, I'm in support of it. It's not a property tax, it's a sales tax. So I'm more apt to support that. But I just think, like Chief Smith said, like you don't see these coming out very often, and we would be disingenuous to not go for this and explore it. So I know I will be in support of a councilmatic decision, especially for the grant, the sales tax. I'm leaning that way right now, but I can't wait to hear more about it at the May meeting. So I really appreciate your time in this presentation today. I've learned a lot, and I want to just thank our PA officers for everything you guys do.
Thank you, John. Latricia, did you want to add anything?
Not anything
Okay.
that's
No problem.
substantive,
Okay.
except for appreciate the police department's hard work. On the grant, I know what it's like writing grants. It's a lot of work, especially trying to meet their requirements. As you indicated earlier, there are 5 the criteria that you had to address in the grant. And then you also have to be a really great storyteller when you're writing those grants, which is important. And no, I'm in support of this. And I think one of the things it does is it helps to alleviate some of the pressure off the general fund while also addressing the needs of our communities they've spoken out. So no, my hands go up to all of the police officers in our department and everybody that works really hard. And I have to tell you, I even get rave reviews from my daughter at the high school about our police officers. So keep up the good work. When a freshman is paying attention, that you guys are doing an awesome job. Thank you.
Thanks, Latricia. Navarra, go ahead.
All right, finally got it all to work together. I wanted to talk a little bit more about the sales tax. I just wanted to echo what John mentioned, that I think it's really valuable that this is a sales tax, not a property tax. And part of that is that in the past, we've heard that our police services and fire services go up during tourist season. And when I heard that, I was, the first time I was kind of floored. And I think it's worth saying and repeating again and again is that, the part of the cost that the community members, the people who live here, the residents of Port Angeles pay for having a tourist-based economy is, essentially like increased crime and EMS services in the summers particularly. And I think that any way that we can and also as Latricia just mentioned, recoup some of those costs through, not a property tax by the people who are coming here and buying things here, I think is really valuable. I think I helped advocate for this bill or a bill similarly to it at the state legislature a few years ago when it unfortunately did not pass, and advocated for the councilmatic way of being able to approve this. So I don't have a problem with us moving forward, and I hope we move forward, and I hope we do move forward quickly. However, I am also hesitant to approve a tax where we as a council are not clear on exactly what services are going to be covered under it. And I think that our community members and our residents deserve to know where we're putting that money before passing that tax. So like John, I don't think that 20 minutes is adequate. And I'm hoping that we can have a couple of staff proposals on what that would look like. I brought up the RCW and would just like to read a couple of lines from it on what kinds of services could be funded. They say criminal justice purposes means activities that substantially assist the criminal justice system, which may include circumstances where ancillary benefit to the civil justice and behavioral health system occurs, and which includes domestic violence services, staffing adequate public defenders to provide appropriate defense for individuals, because as we know, if there are more arrests, we have to provide more funding for public defenders, diversion programs, reentry work for inmates, local government programs that have a reasonable relationship to reducing the numbers of people interacting with the criminal justice system, including but not limited to reducing homelessness or improving behavioral health, community placements for juvenile offenders, and community outreach and assistance programs, alternative response programs, and mental health crisis response, including but not limited to the Recovery Navigator program. So with that, there are a number of different things that we could be doing with this money, either in a partnership with or instead of funding just the police department. And I think that it's worth considering what our options are under the law and making sure that what we decide to use that tax for, and maybe this is funding the police department for a certain period of time and expanding this out, or again, looking at how do we continue to invest in upstream responses and programs. Is what we're doing now enough? I don't know. We haven't had that conversation. That is what I'm hoping that we can have in the future. Again, also knowing, and to Amy's point, that I think it is really valuable and incumbent on us to be responsive to having this taxing ability and to make sure that we, personally, I'd like to see it be able to be implemented so we can plan for it in our 2027 budgeting. So I know that's kind of a short timeline, but I am hoping that we can have a further conversation about what kinds of services are being proposed that we fund through this tax. Thank you.
Thank you, Navarra. I'm going to go real quick and then I can go back around. So I also want to start by just saying thank you to all the law enforcement, those who are here tonight, and of course, everyone who isn't here. Definitely appreciate all of the work that you do for our community. And definitely am in favor of accepting the grant. That definitely, I agree with everyone else, is sort of a no-brainer. And I think, while I think it's worth having additional conversation, one of the things that's important to me that we remember when we're talking about the sales tax is, while our number one legislative priority for many, many years has been an adequate, non-regressive state tax structure, currently the tools in the toolbox are things like sales tax. And I think it's important for us to use the tools that the state gives us when the state gives them to us, because otherwise it's hard to make the argument that we still need more. We also, of course, have affordability issues, and that's a concern, but I think the sales tax is the the better of all of the options at this point. Be better if it was a refund, but adding a little bit of tax does allow us to tax folks who come for a visit. It's too bad we couldn't do it last year and we could catch all of the people coming for the World Cup. But here we are. Better late than never. Anyway, I think it's important for us to use the tools that are given to us. It makes it easier for us to argue for different kinds of funding streams in the future when we show that we are doing all of the things, we are using all of the tools that have been offered. I also think it's important for people to understand, and I think it's been talked about enough tonight, but one of the talking points I think that is valuable from a community perspective is the way that law enforcement works. You will always have administratively unavoidable overtime. You will get the call 5 minutes before your shift's over, but you're the one there, so you have to take the call, and now it's a few hours later. And so what this would allow us to do, if I understand correctly, is significantly reduce those, hey, we don't have enough people, we need someone to come in. And that is where, like, you guys sign up for the job knowing that you might not get off at 7. It's the not getting called in at 3 o'clock in the afternoon that we want to stop, so that you can make the birthday party that you rearranged to be on a day that wasn't the birthday because you actually had a shift on the birthday. That's really important to me. And I also think that we definitely want to take this. We need to improve our capacity, and the city should take the responsibility to improve our staffing and I just want to acknowledge that we gratefully have been able to do the things that we've been able to do because other people show up, right? Other agency assists happen regularly, but that shouldn't be the default, and it definitely is right now. So I think we need to staff up. Whether that means we can be the other agency assist on a regular basis or not, I don't know, but not consistently being okay because there's a sheriff's deputy available to be out with you is something I think we need to do. So I will stop there because I think I've already said what I need to say. And Drew, you wanted to go again.
Yeah, I had a few things, some of which has already been echoed by the time it come back to me. But yes, I do think it's important that we point out that for the sales tax, it's going to cost about $20 a household versus, I'm going to start stealing the term cowboy math. I like that. Versus, I think it's about $51 a household if we shoved it as a property tax. That is very loosey-goosey numbers based off of previous things that we've looked at of property tax versus sales tax increases. So please, no one hold me to that number. But basically, the $30 savings that households have in PAs because we subsidize it by the people who are visiting from out of town. So $30 versus $20. So more than half of it is paid for by people who don't live in PA. So yes, let's outsource that to other people and not just us. So also, if I haven't blatantly stated it yet tonight, I support accepting this grant. I've been submitting letters to higher elected officials than I in support of this for, I think Amy's right. I swear to God, this has been like 3 years we've been dealing with trying to get this grant, me telling people that this grant is coming. I swear it is. And so I support that. As far as the sales tax goes, I have a couple observations and a couple, some math related. As far as, well, what should we use that money for? Well, I mean, frankly, that's easy. Most of it has to go to the 4 officers we just hired. That's kind of the point of the sales tax, is to be able to fund the officers once that grant funding for 2 years runs out. If we don't, we either pull from the general fund or we let go of our 4 officers. Like, that's kind of the 2 options. Or get real creative. Corey can have more cuts, right? I'm sure Parks doesn't need more employees. I'm being very sarcastic if there actually happens to be anyone watching right now, because I realize that they're about the least funded staff department I think we have. But what that does leave us is, and I'm just going to call it leftover, excess, surplus, whatever, about $241,000 with the sales tax. After we pay for the officers that the grant allowed us to basically pay for outright. That is the amount we will be discussing. I'm going to go ahead and throw out that my recommendation is, how many more officers can I get for that? And it sounds like 1 reliably, possibly 2, depending upon how math equates. And in the time frame from when the grant runs out to when we need to start using it, that might be enough time to save that fund to pay for the initial acquisition costs of those officers. So we're not taking a giant hit in the general budget trying to pay for 2 new officers. Also in my head, and I'm just going to assume that employees are employees, regardless of what profession they're in. You probably don't want a third of your staff to be brand new all simultaneously. So 6 brand new officers on paper sound like really awesome and cool, but in actuality, here's 4 new officers. Now you can have 2 more new officers. And if the police department wants to correct my estimate of that, by all means, go for it. But just as someone who manages people, I suspect you would rather break up the number of new people all of a sudden. And then the last thing I want to say about the sales tax is, and this is probably going to be once again directed towards finance. Sorry, finance. So October 18th is the deadline for DOR notification. But we need to do part of this for the grant, if I'm understanding correctly. What is the actual deadline? Because on the one hand, we want to move fast for the grant, accept the grant now. But in actuality, it sounds like we have until October 18th for council to pass the sales tax increase. Well, I mean, staff would want more than 14 hours, I suspect. So we'll call it September. Staff would like by September to have that from council, I assume, correct?
Yeah, so October 18th is the last day that DOR will accept the approved ordinance for implementation for January 1st. However, it can be passed at any point and submitted to DOR prior to that. I would recommend that maybe we do that in line with building our budget so that we have some predictability in 2027. So we'd be looking for July, August timeframe for a decision from council on that tax.
Okay, and that's what I wanted to find out because I want to be very clear. No one likes us talking about taxes, so I really don't want to throw that on as a discussion item for our next council meeting for us to then make a motion that we really want to do this. It sounds like we can make sure everyone is very well aware of the fact that we are discussing a 1/10 of 1% well out in advance to be in line with when we have the rest of our budget conversation for 2027. And that would be my
Yes, and if staff can correct me, but it would be an ordinance that would require 2 public hearings. So we would not be like, I think so, or no, I don't know.
So council, there's a series of steps when we do a councilmanic approach to a sales tax. And we've done it before for transportation benefit district and some other taxes. But typically there's a series of resolutions, in some cases ordinances. We can certainly build in a public hearing if that's not already required. I think the first step would likely be at your next meeting, we'd like to get some council direction. Is this something that you want us to pursue? Because as Director Carrizosa mentioned, we want to align this with budget. And to do that, we need some direction to begin the process of moving forward, knowing that this is a multi-step approach before council where you'll have to do a variety of approvals, but it starts with direction to staff.
All right. Anything else from council? Okay, Mark, go ahead.
Sorry, just clarification, mostly for public consumption. Confirmation rather, that this grant only applies to new officers, not lateral hires.
Right. Yeah, they excluded in the language lateral officers specifically.
Thank you.
And I don't think it got in there, but there was one proposal that it actually had to be from your community, which would make recruiting really tough. But it is only new officers, so there's no recruiting from other agencies. Yep.
All right. Well, we have 7 minutes left. I do want to say one last thing, and that is that I really appreciate our leadership, particularly police leadership, having a can-do attitude instead of a can't-do attitude, because I definitely heard from other people around the state, not that this wasn't a little bit frustrating, but this just like, we just can't do it. We can't do it. And instead of doing that, you said, what do we need to do to make it work? And I just think that's worth calling out as well. And I think that we see that consistently we have seen that over and over with PAPD, and I really appreciate that. I mean, I think the rest of the city as well, but in this particular case, want to call that out because I think it is additional work, and you just do it, and we appreciate that. In addition to the work that you're already, like all your regular work, adding all of this, instead of saying this is just impossible. So I appreciate that as well. And I guess we can leave with 6 minutes to spare. So thank you all very much. Thank
you, Mayor.
Chief.
Thank you, Council.